Hi, and welcome to iHeart Cooking. I'm registered dietitian Jennifer Stachler.
And I'm Chef Dugan Wetzel.
We are both from Reid Health. Today's program is brought to you by Reid Health Community Benefits, RPNL, and WCTV. Today on iHeart Cooking, we're going to be talking about beans, and more beans. iHeart Cooking, we're going to be talking about beans. There's a lot of different types of beans that you can work with. I mean, you got pinto beans, you got red kidney beans, you got black beans. I mean, there's a lot out there that you can find. We are going to be working with black beans, which tends to be one of my favorite beans out there. I use black beans a lot for a variety of different recipes, and we're going to kind of go more of a Mexican dish. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be doing a butternut squash and black bean tostados.
Yeah.
If I can say that word right, because I can't get it out. But we're going to start at the very beginning of this recipe is the squash itself, the butternut squash. And Dugan's going to kind of explain how we're going to be cutting up that butternut squash.
First thing I do, I always take the top off. Now, you want to be careful because it is kind of a pretty fibrous squash. So going through with a knife, it's not going to go through really easily. So just take your time, be careful. Always be sure that your hands are far enough away from the knife. I kind of rock it just a little bit to slowly get through there. Get me a starting point. And then I push and glide and let the knife do the work. There we go. And that is the inside of the butternut squash. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to clean it out. Regular spoon works fine. A fork will work as well. You're just gonna, my suggestion is lean over the trash can and just kind of scoop it out for you at home. Just kind of run your spoon around it to make sure you get the larger part. Depending on how mature the squash is, it could be a real small hole or it could be a deep, wide base to it. Yeah. Just continue working on it until you get it all out of there.
Yep, just get all those seeds and everything out of there as much as possible.
Yeah.
One thing about butternut squash, it is a winter squash, so that's why it has that hard exterior to it, so it can last longer through the winter months. It's kind of with that acorn squash and the pumpkin as well. They're all kind of that same group of squashes.
Absolutely.
One nice thing about butternut squash, you can see that nice orange color to it. Means it has beta carotene, and once it enters the body, it turns into vitamin A, which is a really good vitamin to help with good eyesight, along with a variety of other things it does for our bodies.
Okay, now we are going to actually take the butternut squash off of the rind on the outside. So what I do, I lay it on its flat surface so it's not rolling around on you, and then just take the knife, cut it in half. Again, take your time, because it's very firm.
It is very firm.
Yeah.
And that's something you can purchase butternut squash already in a package, already cut up for you if you'd like, especially for those of you that maybe don't have that upper arm strength. They do have pre-cut butternut squashes available. That way you don't have to do this and you're not, straining yourself to have that, because it does take some upper body strength.
It really does. The next part that I'm doing here, I'm sitting it on its edge. The top part that we cut off, I'm just sitting it there, holding it in place, and then running my knife through the butternut squash just to get a nice, clean chunk that we can work with.
Yeah. More of that flush out of the butternut squash.
Exactly, yeah.
A lot of recipes that use butternut squash, the most popular way to kind of, prepare it is you can put it in the oven or put it in a microwave and soften it, and then you kind of just scoop the actual orange flesh out of it from the skin. This is kind of a little bit different because we're going to want chunks of the butternut squash for this recipe, because it's going to be actually on top of our tostados.
Yep. Yeah, you got it right. Yeah, tostados. That is the more popular way to do it, but you're absolutely right. It's easier to cut it into chunks when it's still firm and not cooked. So what we're going to do get rid of our exterior here. Now, since we're steaming it in a pot of boiling water, we're going to actually cut them into smaller pieces. That way it saves time, because the smaller pieces don't take as long to cook all the way through. And you're going to be using, for this recipe, a smaller 6-inch tostada. So it would be better plate presentation,
Absolutely.
easier to eat with the smaller pieces of the butternut squash. So again, laying it on its flat side, just cutting small strips, and then we'll go back through after we're done and cut them into a small dice. Maybe a 1/2-inch dice is all the bigger you're going to need, all the size you're going to need. So now that we've got it into strips, we're just going to go back through and then easily dice it into chunks. We'll go ahead and add it to our basket.
And this is going to be our steamer basket, which we already have a pot of boiling water, or water getting to that boil point, that we'll put the steamer basket on that.
Okay.
Or over that, I should say, not on it, because we actually don't want the water to touch the actual steamer basket. So while Dugan's finishing up cutting this, one thing we do want to bring to your attention, butternut squash, sometimes when you're cutting it and kind of handling it, has like this film to it that you kind of will get on the knife, your hands when prepping this, and that's something that can kind of make it a little bit more dangerous when cutting it. So just be aware that it will have that kind of filminess. Sometimes even after handling butternut squash, you'll go wash your hands and your hands will still feel like it has something on them. That is very common for these squashes, especially the winter squashes, to have that kind of feeling. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of some of that juice being taken away from that squash. All right, so we're still waiting a little bit for this water to boil before we actually put our butternut squash on that. We do have it covered with foil just to kind of speed up that process. It's kind of, the foil is representing a lid. So that's something, most of your saucepans that you have at home will have a lid, that you'll just use the lid instead of aluminum foil. But if you don't have a lid, this is a great alternative to use to kind of help with that. So while that's getting to the boil state, we're actually going to move on and start making our tostadas. So that's something that you can make your own at home. You don't have to have the prepackaged or anything like that. You're just going to take regular corn tortillas and make it in the oven.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of oil. You want to coat your pan to make sure that it doesn't stick, and then rub a little bit of oil on top. Canola oil is always a good option because it's not going to get too dark, and it'll give you that crispy texture that you're wanting. So we have our oven set at 350. We're just going to go ahead and put it in 4 to 5 minutes. We'll check it and see where we're at.
Yeah. It doesn't take long to make your own at home, and plus then you get that fresh, crispy taste to it, and it's fresh out of the oven. You're not having something that's prepackaged or already done for you. And plus it saves on the cost doing it a little bit at your home as well. Just like with the butternut squash, if you would get it pre-cut, it's going to cost a little bit more than cutting it yourself as well. Okay, we're going to put our butternut squash onto the boiling water, and again, we're just going to place it on top.
There we go.
All in there.
Now, another reason why we're using the aluminum foil here is once you put a steamer basket, if your pot doesn't come with a steamer basket, the lids sometimes don't fit properly. So you've got the steam leaving the water, and it kind of cools down and slows down the cooking temperature and time of the butternut squash. So an easy fix for that, aluminum foil folds and manipulates the pan really easily. So that's why we're doing it right here.
Absolutely. And like Dugan said, there are some saucepans or that come with that steamer already in there. I know a lot of times if you have, like, you get a whole cooking set versus with all the skillets and things, they usually have one that combines all of that, so you don't have to worry about the lid not fitting. So I know that's something that is more popular now than it used to. I mean, steaming, one advantage is of steaming versus cooking it, using a microwave, other things. it helps keep the nutrients in there more, because that's something that a lot of times if you're putting it straight into the boiling water, those nutrients are going to be sucked out of basically the butternut squash, and not as many are going to be left in there. Where when you're just steaming it with that steam, more of the nutrients stay inside that butternut squash, so it's actually more nutritious in the end for you to steam it versus actually putting vegetables in boiling water. Part of this recipe, while this butternut squash sits here and boils and the Tostitos are in the oven, we can actually prepare the rest of our mixture. So we're actually going to have that bean mixture. So you're probably like, where are the beans at if this is a bean episode? Well, that's where we're going to get into next, is actually the bean mixture with the black beans that we're going to kind of mix all together.
Absolutely. And that's exactly all we're going to do. Black beans, these are a canned product, easy way to get them clean and get all of the excess sodium and everything off of it is put it in a strainer and run it under water. Just like in the last episode that we had, just kind of run your fingers through it, make sure that all the skins are off. We're just going to add it to our
one tip about heart health, and Dugan kind of mentioned this with the sodium, is a lot of canned products do have sodium. They are making more and more canned products that are lower in sodium. A little tip that I do when I go to the grocery store, I will grab every kind of black bean or canned product they have, no matter the manufacturer who makes it. I'll place them all out on the shelf and I'll go down and find the one that's lowest in sodium, because that's what I'm looking for. And then I'll go home and then I'll still rinse it with water a couple of times to help kind of get rid of more of that sodium as much as I can.
So while we're moving along, I'll catch you up to speed. We've just put a couple green onions in here, some scallions, a little bit of chili powder, about a teaspoon. We put a tablespoon of cumin, and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of lime juice. And as we're saying that, our tostadas, we're going to check on them here. You're good. Just pull that out.
Are they done?
We'll probably turn them and do the other side.
So what we're going to do now is we took these out of the oven and we're just going to flip them. That way they're not going to be brown all on one side, they're not going to get crunchy all on one side, and they get evenly cooked at the same time. So we just flip them and we're going to put them back in the oven for about another 4 minutes. So while Dugan's mixing that bean mixture, one other thing that you can do to add extra flavor is you can actually take some of that leftover chili powder and you can actually sprinkle it on top of the butternut squash while it's cooking, because that's going to give it more of that flavor impact, especially since we're not using salt. We actually omitted it from this recipe to, again, for help with heart health. We're going to reduce some of that. We get so much sodium in our daily intake from other foods already. We don't want to add any extra if we don't have to. So, oops. We'll just kind of get him right up here.
Did it fall out? Might be one.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think the oven said it's warm.
Yeah.
So we're just going to put that chili powder right on top of those, give that extra little flavor, and we'll put this back on top of it. So now we have our bean mixture done. It doesn't have to be used again until we actually construct our whole final product of that tostadas. Additional information kind of about some of this. The reason we use a scallion versus an onion, things like that, is because it has a more mild flavor to it. Yeah. Sometimes when you have that onion, it has more of that crunch to it because we're not actually cooking it. So that scallions has more of just the green of the onion, versus having the actual onion itself, which is going to make it a little bit more crunchier, has a little bit more bite. This is a little bit more mild because this mixture is not being cooked.
Right.
And because we are talking so much about sodium right now with this recipe, a recommendation is if you're somebody who, a normal average American, you don't have any kind of heart issues, no hypertension, I would say around 2,000 milligrams or less of sodium per day. If you're somebody with heart health, hypertension, or even fluid retention, if you are experiencing that, I would recommend 1,500 milligrams or less per day.
So now that the black bean mixture is completed, the final thing that we have to do, we have to make sort of a lime vinaigrette to toss with our lettuce. So we have about a tablespoon of lime here. a tablespoon of canola oil. All we're gonna do, really easy, mix it together. Just enough so that they're blended. And we're gonna drizzle it over top of our lettuce.
So it's basically like your own little salad that we're putting on top of this with your own little dressing.
Right.
A great additive to add more vegetables to this product.
Mm-hmm. And that lime will give it kind of a kick, a nice little finish at the end there too. A nice little bite for it. Okay. So that is ready. Now we're waiting on our tostadas to finish cooking. The butternut squash is almost there. We're almost ready to assemble.
Yep, absolutely. So our tostados are actually done now. So we're actually going to take them out of the oven. And when we take them out and bring them up close to the camera here, you can actually see that they have that brownish flavor that you know they're actually done. So that's something that they kind of puff up a little bit, so don't be surprised by that aspect at all. But that's something that, there's a little bit of moisture down there. You probably heard that little bit sizzling when we were putting it on there, but it actually puffs up a little bit for you at home. So we'll let those cool a second. We'll get our butternut squash off of the boiling water, and then we're actually going to assemble the final product for you. Are we ready?
Yeah.
So we'll take this off of here, and you can see all that steam escape, and we're going to take the butternut squash off of that, and we're going to actually leave it in chunks, and that's something preferable. You can leave it in chunks, you can smash it, but we're going to leave it in chunks just to get that nice orange color on top.
Just kind of mixing it a little bit just to distribute the chili powder so that it's on all the pieces here.
So we have all our ingredients already done and prepped, so now it's going to be more the fact of let's assemble this. So we're going to start with that tostados.
First thing we're going to do is put our black beans on there. Just evenly spread them out.
Calls them the stick. And you might see them run away a little bit, but it'll come together with everything else that we have here.
Putting on our butternut squash. Gives it that nice contrast of color when you've got the browns and the black. You've got green from the scallions and a little bit of orange from the butternut squash. Now we'll get that nice bite from the lettuce that has the canola oil and the lime juice on it. And then we'll top it off with just a little bit of feta cheese. You can use feta, you can use queso fresco, which is a more authentic Mexican cheese, but for the sake of this recipe, they're very similar in texture and flavor, but this is what we're using here.
So when you look at this recipe, one nice thing is you have your tostados, which is your grain product. You have your black beans, which are going to give you that protein that you're looking for and actually consider a more starch. Then you have your butternut squash, which is more of a starchy vegetable. You have your lettuce, which is a non-starchy vegetable. And then you're adding just a little bit of cheese on top of there. So that's something that you got a good amount of nutrition here, as well as a variety of different food groups as well. So we're going to cut this up and give it a try. And you can hear that crunch when Dugan cut that because of that Tostitos or the flour tortillas actually being in the oven, and it actually gives it that more crunch flavor there to it. So then you just pick it up, and basically you're just going to take a bite out of it. So you got that little bit of crunch from that tortilla that you have there, or the tostados. And then you get into more of that, what I really tasted was that lime vinaigrette that really came out. But yet that butternut squash isn't going to have such a large flavor to it because it's more a little bit mild. And then you have those black beans that's going to give it more of that grainy taste to it.
What I like about it is the subtle undertones of the cumin and the chili powder. Gives it really that southwestern that flavor appeal, and then that feta kind of just cleanses the palate after you eat it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kind of gives that refreshing of it, and the feta, again, it is the cheese. It's going to have a little bit more of salt in it, or sodium. So it kind of does still give that salty aspect without us adding any additional to that. The other nice thing about this, if you want to add more flavor, don't be afraid to add more chili powder, to add more cumin. Maybe if you're somebody who likes it a little bit more hot, adding some cayenne pepper or something that would give it more of that kick to it. You could possibly add some hot sauce on top, but again, you gotta realize a lot of those are gonna be commercially made and higher in that sodium aspect with it. A little suggestion you can also do, because you probably see that when we're eating this, things are just falling everywhere. At home, you're gonna have a plate catching all the good stuff for you. But one thing that you could possibly do is you can actually mash those butternut squash and then kind of put it as a paste before you put the beans on it, so everything kind of stays on. I kind of like this, personally I like this version just because you can see everything and it looks really pretty when you look at it. But you can absolutely smash it so the beans and everything stays on so you don't have things falling all over the place for you. But here's to beans, and more beans.